Project Popeye had opened the door to a new and dangerous type of warfare.
Some said, if you control the weather, you can control the world. Military planners imagined loading the clouds with radiological, biological, or chemical agents and having them rain on demand.
They could attack your enemy using the weather, but deny ever doing so. Allegations were made that cloud seeding had not only made jungle paths impassable, it had also killed thousands of innocent people. But this didn't stop governments from continuing to explore ways of modifying the weather, sometimes for highly questionable purposes.
And that message calls for new frontiers, new visions. It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world. It lays the steps that's necessary to provide a nuclear rocket that will produce benefits that are so unlimited that I couldn't tell you about them if I had all afternoon.
July 1976. Strange, unexplained blackouts in worldwide communications plague the globe and are covertly transmitting extremely low-frequency waves, otherwise known as ELF waves.
It's called the Russian woodpecker because it was essentially that sort of clicking, pecking sound.
In 1982, a report by Pentagon researcher H.A.A.R.P alleges the Russian woodpecker signal is actually creating layers of artificial ionization in the upper atmosphere, which means it could have been bending the jet stream and altering global wind patterns.
There's been a lot of research in military labs over what you can do with putting radio waves into the atmosphere. Some of the research indicates that one can move the jet stream around and thus induce weather conditions.
It's no coincidence that the United States began building its own mysterious array of antennas.
H.A.A.R.P is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, originally a joint effort of the Air Force and Navy in cooperation with a number of academic institutions.
Of 180 antennas, approximately 72 feet tall, linked together to function as one giant steerable antenna. Steerable because it can aim millions of watts of ELF waves into one tiny patch of the atmosphere. H.A.A.R.P is one of several ELF wave transmitters located all over the globe. Working in tandem, these transmitters alter the weather anywhere in the world, potentially changing the jet stream's course entirely. The intense energy being beamed into the sky by H.A.A.R.P sends pulses of ELF waves into the ionosphere. The waves get reflected back down and pass through the Earth and ocean. But H.A.A.R.P's startling potential doesn't end there. It's linked to a strange phenomena occurring in our skies.
On clear days, you can often see long white lines being traced high in the sky. They are contrails of jet aircraft, actually long, slender clouds. Weathermen are finding them especially fascinating because a theory is being developed that those long white lines may be changing our weather for the better. Details from Roger O'Neill.
The exhaust from jet engines, usually seen as long, thin trails of white clouds behind high-flying jet airplanes, may be a big reason why there are 30 fewer days of sunshine a year in the Midwest now than there were in 1900. The daily range between high and low temperatures has also narrowed.
In the absence of natural clouds, given the correct atmospheric conditions, jet aircraft in high frequency can almost completely cover the atmosphere with clouds.
No one is trying to make clouds now using jet engines, but this study suggests that jet travel is inadvertently making our days more cloudy. And someday, weather researchers may be able to use jets on purpose to change our weather. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Champaign, Illinois.
And finally, a federal report today predicted possible catastrophic warming of the Earth by the 1990s with the strong climate change.
Hurricane Gloria is moving on the East Coast tonight like a monster out of a science fiction film.
3,000 homes went underwater, and of those, almost 900 were destroyed.
From 1987 through 1992, California experienced the most severe drought in the state's history. According to NOAA, an anomaly occurs in the jet stream. The winds appear to change direction, blowing east to west instead of west to east, indicating the jet stream coming into the west is suddenly much weaker than normal, causing a drought. By 1995, the jet stream returns to normal.
Here there were huge problems with flooding, intersections and parking lots underwater, homes threatened, people trapped in the river that you see out here behind me, forcing those dramatic rescues.
This U.S. Air Force report graphically outlines the military's desire to exploit and manipulate the weather for the purposes of war by the year 2025. According to one of the most harrowing lines in this report, quote, "Weather modification is a force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited across the full spectrum of war-fighting environments."
Man-made global warming is no longer just a theory about climate. It is the defining moral and political cause of our age. It is presented in the media as having the stamp of authority of an impressive international organization.
From the IPCC,
the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC.
I've often heard it said that there is a consensus of thousands of scientists on the global warming issue and that humans are causing a catastrophic change to the climate system. Well, I am one scientist, and there are many that simply think that is not true.
The final conclusions are politically driven.
This claim that the IPCC is the world's top 1,500 or 2,500 scientists, you look at the bibliographies of the people and it's simply not true. There are quite a number of non-scientists.
And to build the number up to 2,500, they have to start taking reviewers and government people and so on, anyone who ever came close to them. And none of them are asked to agree. Many of them disagree.
Those people who are specialists but don't agree with the polemic and resign, and there have been a number that I know of, they are simply put on the author list and become part of this 2,500 of the world's top scientists.
People have decided you have to convince other people that since no scientist disagrees, you shouldn't disagree either.
Climate scientists need there to be a problem in order to get funding.
We have a vested interest in creating panic because then money will flow to climate science.
It's become a great industry in itself. And if the whole global warming farrago collapsed, there'd be an awful lot of people out of jobs and looking for work.
There's one thing you shouldn't say, and that is, this might not be a problem.
If you go to page 119 of the president's budget, he's anticipating generating $646 billion in new tax revenue from this bill. So clearly the president expects this bill to generate $646 billion in new taxes that even his own budget director has said would be passed on to consumers. So you must have been listening to our testimony that we've had for the last few days with dozens of experts that have come in who have given completely different views.
Well, I
would encourage you to go back and look at the testimony this committee's heard. Dude, we're talking about that can export millions of jobs out of our economy, out of our country, and testimony's been given just to those numbers. And so we're talking about a serious consequence that there would be on this country. The carbon would be emitted, but it would be emitted in China and India, and the jobs would go to China and India. Do you want to
man-made global warming pollution causes global warming.
It's my understanding that back in 1997, when you were vice president, Enron's CEO, Ken Lay, was involved in discussions with you at the White House about helping develop this type of policy, this trading scheme. And is that accurate? Is it inaccurate? It's been reported.
I don't know, but I met with Ken Lay, as lots of people did, before anybody knew that he was a crook.
And clearly you can see why so many of us are concerned about turning over this country's energy economy.
I didn't know him well enough to call him Kenny Boy.
You knew him well enough to help devise this trading scheme, and obviously we know what Enron and these big guys on Wall Street like Goldman Sachs, and I know you've got interest with Goldman Sachs.
No.
These people, well, that's been reported. Is that not accurate?
No, I wish I did.
I'm saying that there are going to be big winners and big losers in this bill, and I think that should be noted, that companies like Enron helped come up with this trading scheme that would be
Enron
I don't know if this is true or not, that some scientists are trying to figure out a way to block the sun to try to slow down global warming.
Yeah, it's a measure of the feeling of desperation that some of them feel.
Are they really thinking they could do that?
Well,